What is this? NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang was just asked if we are in an AI bubble. This was his full 3 minute response. It literally doesn't make sense to ask any of these people if we're in the AI bubble. Like, literally, are they going to say, yes, we are actually? Can you guys pull out all the investment in my company? Thank you very much. And reduce my net worth down from 160 billion to 2 billion. Of course, they'll never say that. It's like this guy said, you never ask a barber if you need a haircut. What do you think he will say? Exactly. But let's see what he had to say.
Are we going to have an AI bubble?
That's the last question. All right, no. All right, let me just tell you what we see. Okay, so I think it's really important when you look at
Elon is looking at him like, please save me, please. Just come up with something good here.
What's happening around the world and go back to first principles of what's happening in computer science and computing. There are three things that's happening. The first thing is that we all know that Moore's law has run its course, and the amount of demand for computing versus the amount of computation we can get out of general purpose computing is really challenging. And so the world's been moving to accelerated computing for some time. We've been pushing this now for over 20 years. Let me give you one statistic. I was just at supercomputing. 6 years ago, CPUs were 90% of the world's supercomputers, top 500 supercomputers. 6 years ago. This year...
If you guys don't understand what he's basically trying to get to, he's basically shitting on CPUs. And I guess the whole point is that he's saying that CPUs have stalled. So it has to be GPUs that now take over. And because he's the GPU king, then it means you should keep investing in him. And there's a huge red flag with this, but we'll get back to that in a bit.
Less than 15%. Went from 90% to 10%. And meanwhile, accelerated computing went from the other way, 10% to now 90%. Okay, so you're seeing that inflection point, the transition in high-performance computing from general purpose computing to accelerated computing. Well, one of the most intensive computation things that the world does in cloud is data processing. Several $100 billion of computation is done on just raw data processing. It has nothing to do with AI.
I feel like what these CEOs do is they try to use a lot of words to just distract us from the answer, or to even distract us from the question in the first place, because this is a very convoluted answer here. But let's give him a second to collect his thoughts.
Processing data frames, everybody's names, address, their sex, their age, where they live, how much money they make. All of that sits into a data frame. And that data frame drives the world today, whether it's in banking or whether it's in credit cards or, of course, e-commerce and everything from ad recommendation. Everything is driven off of that data frame. That data frame costs hundreds of dollars to go compute. And so that's the number one thing, end of Moore's law. The second thing is generative.
So he's first, just to understand, he's just saying, okay, Moore's law has ended. That's why the hype that has been behind NVIDIA is worth it. No, it's not. No one has thought of Moore's law ending, and that's why they invested in NVIDIA. It doesn't make any sense. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is that one of the reasons their stock is extremely inflated is because of generative AI. So that doesn't really explain why we're not in a bubble, but let's see if he gets into it.
15 years is called REXs, recommender systems. How do we know what information to recommend to us in a social feed? How do you know what ad to recommend to somebody? What book to recommend, what movie to recommend. The internet is so gigantic, without a recommender system, that a little tiny phone of us will have no chance of ever seeing the right information.
He's not saying this.
Is the engine of the internet today. That's going generative AI. It used to be running on CPUs, now it runs on GPUs. Which then says the third thing, if you just look at those two applications, many of the internet companies can build an enormous number of GPU supercomputers just doing that. Of course, then it creates the third opportunity on top of it, which is agentic AI. This is Grok, and this is OpenAI, this is Anthropic, this is Gemini. Agentic AI sits on top of that. But don't forget to think about what is happening underneath what everybody sees as AI today. There's a whole movement of computing from general purpose computing to accelerated.
What? I mean, this on its own would literally make me sell all my stocks in NVIDIA, because basically what he's saying is that GPUs can be used for other things. And there's a big industry in GPUs for recommending what you see on your social feed and also just for like general CPU replacement. Now, the reason this doesn't make any sense, in my opinion, is because most of the hype that has been put in NVIDIA is all because of AI and the promise of AGI. That's why everyone is investing all their money into NVIDIA, because they believe that OpenAI, or one of the big labs, is a few months or years away from AGI. That's where all the investment is coming from. So to then say that the value of NVIDIA is justified because of recommender systems and CPUs reaching a ceiling, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That on its own literally explains why this is a bubble. For those of you that don't understand what a bubble is, imagine a balloon. Every time you buy stock in, let's say, NVIDIA or an AI company, you're basically increasing the price of the market. So you're making the balloon bigger. This is okay if it's like, if the balloon or the market is actually worth the price that you're expanding it to fill. But the problem is, when the hype keeps building, this balloon keeps getting bigger. At some point, you end up surpassing the real price of the market. And once you surpass that, then everything after that is basically the difference between reality and hype. And now when the bubble bursts is when people start realizing, oh my God, there's a big difference between the actual price of the market and where we think it is. So everyone just starts dumping their stocks. For example, Palantir dumped their stocks in NVIDIA. SoftBank also dumped their stocks of NVIDIA. And then people start panicking, and eventually they start selling all their shares, and the balloon keeps getting lower. And it might even get lower that it passed the actual market value. And it just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking down. So the problem of what he's basically said is that one of the reasons we've made the balloon so big is because we think AGI is coming. But if it's actually because, if the value of the company is actually meant to be because of recommender system or CPUs, then it's not meant to be that big. We should just make it smaller, which basically means pop the bubble. That's what I'm getting here.
And that, if you take that into consideration, you'll come to the conclusion that in fact, what is left over to fuel that revolutionary agentic AI is not only substantially less than you thought, and all of it justified.
Elon just nods his head. Let's see what people are saying. The earnings today will tell you everything we need to know. The person selling the shovel says the gold rush isn't over. I mean, he has no choice. Like, you guys, I know you're probably going to like shit on him and so on, but you have to realize if you were him, you would do the exact same thing. He's not doing anything out of the ordinary. As the CEO of a company, is meant to make you believe that the value is extremely high. This is all true, by the way, but it doesn't change the fact that a bubble is defined by macroeconomic conditions and not vision. No point in AGI if people starve to death the day before.